All right, we're live. All right, Tony. Tony, I think you're up.
Straight to me, and I don't have it open. 1 second. Come on, Tony. Somebody else go. I'm having a bad day.
I don't even have it up.
Guys, we're gonna go. I gotta do something really quick. Hold on.
Oh, someone could start with a prayer.
Oh, I'll say a prayer. Our Heavenly Father, we're grateful for this day and grateful for the opportunity to come together. We are grateful for the lessons that we can learn through this class, and ask that thy Spirit would be with us as we discuss the case that we have before us. Help us to be able to gain the information and understanding that we need. We might be able to continue to grow our education in this business world, and we are grateful for the opportunities presented from BYU Idaho, and help us to use them in our lives to help us be more successful. We are grateful for thy hand in our lives, and these things we pray for in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. Anybody have a spiritual thought?
No.
Nothing.
Current bush.
Current bush.
The gardener
Good one.
brings it back.
That is a good one.
God give it. He can take away.
There you go. All
So,
right.
to start things off here, does anyone else? So this store operating margin of 80%. Did anybody else see how to figure that out?
I have no idea what that meant.
That sounds. I mean, essentially, it's like earnings, like revenue over. Let me see if I pull this up again. But it's but there's no way it's 80%.
That's after variable costs, right?
Well, it's like total sales minus cost of goods divided by total sales or something like that, and it doesn't make sense at 80% anyway.
Leftover after paying for variable costs of production such as wages. Huh. Not deserving during this week. Yeah. Oh.
Yeah, so essentially, it's
It's a margin ratio used to measure.
divided. So where they were looking at getting 800,000 net sales from the they were only making about 16 or to 19% on that. So 16 to 19% over net sales is not anywhere close to 80%.
It's almost as if it's
cost of goods at 80% makes sense. I don't know if it was just a typo or what, but anyway.
There's got to be something, because you can't own a business only making your operating margin only being 16%. I don't think that's ever going to fly.
It's not that unheard of. I can tell you McDonald's doesn't make more than
Contribution. I'm thinking about
their source.
margin. Different entirely. Contribution margin in the restaurant business should be 60% or higher.
Let's just here and find some more stuff on there.
Anyway, so what was the attractive thing here for Aaron Kennedy?
What's that?
I'm just starting with the questions. What made Noodles and Company an attractive opportunity for Aaron Kennedy in 1995?
It was different.
Well, I think it's because he realized there's a new type of dining experience that could be created, which was fast casual, and it was a market niche, or whatever you want to say, that really nobody tapped into yet. And he saw that it brought different cuisines from a lot of different areas into one place, so it attracted many people, even kids and adults.
The universal noodle.
Yep. Everyone eats noodles.
Yeah. I think the fast casual had already been established with Chipotle and a couple of the other ones before he got into it, but they were definitely on the leading edge.
McDonald's is a big one.
So that question, what makes it an attractive opportunity? I just want to read a little bit from here. It said in January 1996, we sold another $50,000 of stock to our original investors after the original initial offering price of 25 cents per share. I took out a second mortgage on my house and maxed out my 7 credit cards. That doesn't seem like an attractive opportunity for anybody.
Well, it's also the food business, though. That's the restaurant business. That's why it's so dirty. It's just, you think of any restaurant, it's not stable at all.
Man,
Well,
when
I think it speaks to the fact that it is a good opportunity. That's why he was willing to max out everything.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't think there's ever an opportunity where I'd be willing to put my house on the line for it.
But if you had super faith in it, you thought it could make you a millionaire, you wouldn't try?
You know, I'm going to have to agree with Alex on this one. You guys
No,
you
yeah.
just go against the grain, but I'm going to go with the grain on this one. Alex is just
Because the McDonald's guy did the same exact thing.
McDonald's guy was a freaking jackwagon.
He was.
I'm
Well,
not saying that it wouldn't pan out. I'm just saying that I think that from an entrepreneur standpoint, if you were willing to risk the roof over your kid's head, I think that's probably more gambling than effective business.
That's fair. But I mean, that's kind of an individual thing.
Absolutely, absolutely.
I don't think the question is so much treating that as just what is it that made him want to do that? What was the big opportunity that he saw that was enough for him to decide, okay, I'm going to risk the roof over my kids' heads for this kind of thing? And I think it's kind of what he did, is he just saw this idea that hadn't been exploited. It just didn't exist. And it was right in the beginning of this huge boom that was going to happen with the fast casual dining thing. It was kind of a hot thing. And like, who was it? Was it you, Parley, who was saying it was just, even though they weren't the first in, they were right there. They were at the very beginning. I mean, considering how much it grew, I think it gives you numbers all the way up until 2006. It was just insane, the fast casual dining experience was. And they were amongst the first players.
Yeah, but I mean, if you're the first players, you don't know that there's going to be a boom.
Oh, you're right.
You're anticipating. You're anticipating. You're hoping.
Right.
Yeah. So I guess, but the question is, what brought that anticipation to him that he thought was going to happen?
So I'm reading back over this. I'm reading back over this. Just the January 1996 is when he took out that extra 50, and they took out the second mortgage. Yep. The original, he only had one store at that point, and it had turned profitable after 4 months. It just wasn't doing enough to like actually pay him much.
And then that second store was losing money, though, right?
The second store, the second store didn't do really well to begin with, but he had already raised that money because they didn't start that store until March 14th of 1996. So, I mean, from that standpoint, yeah, he needed more capital to be able to do what he was doing, but he already had something that was making money. I mean, at that point, it's like, well, it's not like he put his house at risk before he had a profitable store. I don't know, just throwing that out there.
No, absolutely. I mean, it just seemed weird for me reading that. So.
No, I get that, but as an entrepreneur, man, you're just so, you've got to be sitting by waiting for that opportunity to hit, and then you have to chase it down 100%. I mean, several times while I was reading these cases, I've told myself I would never even be considering this. Especially when it's like, do you take the $200 million payout now, or do you write it out and hope like you make even more money? I'm like, dude, $2 million, whatever. Just give it to me. Yeah.
But at the same time, from my own personal experience, I tried to bootstrap my gun shop, and by the time I closed the shop, I mean, the carrot was always right there. Like I could almost reach it, like the carrot dangling in front of me. And by the time I closed my shop, I'd lost $100,000.
Yeah.
So, and the store's been closed. As far as the expenses or side of things have stopped, but I'm going to be paying off the debt for the next long while. So I guess I can see when you start a business and you get emotionally involved with it, like your rational side of you right now says, hey, yeah, I would never do that. But when you're looking at something that you have put your heart and soul into and it just needs a little bit more cash, like that's going to be a lot tougher decision to make at that point.
Absolutely.
Okay. Let's go to question 2, yeah?
Yep.
What caused the company's early struggles? Why do you think so? It's very fresh on my mind because I was just answering this question in my analysis. Well, the first thing was, I think, their recipes. People didn't really like their food at the very beginning, and that's understandable. They had just launched. But then what hit them even harder were the operation standpoint, how they struggled with that in the beginning.
Yeah.
And once they actually built their own building and they used that building to really implement their own improved processes, that store, even though it was a newer store, instantly became more profitable, even though it wasn't generating as much revenue.
Yeah, they definitely had some pivot.
Operations really struggled for the first bit until they really kind of broke it down and said, this is what we need to do to make money. We're not going to make money the way we're doing it now.
Well, and I think they had to go out in the market and see how other noodle companies were doing so that they could learn. I think they hadn't done a whole lot of market research, maybe you could say, to see what the customer really wanted. He knew what he wanted to give the customer, but he didn't know if that's what the customer actually wanted. So once he went to Chicago, I think it was, and went to some of these other companies and found out what the customers wanted, then he's like, we've got to make a change, otherwise we're going to fail.
And that's the point that I gathered too, was you look at what you want compared to what the customer wants. And I think that's the hardest thing to realize. And that's what I was asking myself at that point in time was, oh, he really wasn't thinking about what the customer really was looking for. Instead it was, he had an idea, he knew what he wanted, and he was going for that instead of switching it, making it a customer. And then once they did that change, once they went to Chicago, tried out all these different recipes, all these different noodles and stuff like that, come back and they're like, okay, you're going to do this, you're going to do this, you're going to do this, and all together it's going to be a well-oiled machine, and it turned around, right? So.
And then he kind of became an advocate for finding out what the customer wanted. Like that's what he wanted his job to be, was customer interaction.
Yeah. Which I thought was pretty cool. That's pretty cool of him to, instead of focusing on their stuff, it was, hey, it's going to focus on the customer.
Yeah.
Okay.
I felt bad for his poodle that drowned in that flood, though. That was terrible.
What?
What?
Oh, was
that
that not?
the news? I think it's on.
Oh, that was in the news. Sorry. Never mind.
There must be a backstory.
I think they caught
So
on.
what about Tom? What's the third question? What's our third question?
What role should franchising play in the company's growth? Okay, this is like the pinnacle question of the case. So what do we think?
I think they definitely need to do it.
Yeah.
I found it hard to look at them now and to just kind of wipe that from my brain and know that they weren't a franchise and know how successful they are now and try to go back. I just thought that was difficult. Like knowing how good they are now and saying, okay.
How many of their stores now are franchises?
Oh, they have hundreds.
So big percentage.
There's one in town.
Yeah.
We'll go there next time.
So the thing for me is, maybe my numbers were off a little bit, but when I looked at how that broke down, they were looking at roughly $450,000 to $500,000 of capital required to build a new location. And when that was all said and done, they would get roughly, they were looking, their minimum was at 800,000 cells per location, and they were making about 16 to 19%, about 16% after I can't remember what the other deal was. I think it was depreciation, but anyway, so that makes about 128,000 a year per location. If for a restaurant business, that's really good. But your return on investment at that point is somewhere around 26, 27% for that first year. But and it gets better after that, obviously. But the going through the other method where the franchising, it cost them about $35,000 to they were getting that from their customers, from the franchisees, and that's about what it would cost. So that was kind of a wash. But they're getting 5% of the 800,000, which works out to about 40. And they said to get to 75% of that was profit. So they have no capital outlay, but they make $30,000 a year from that single location. To me, that's, as far as return on investment, that's pretty good.
Yeah. Well, and they even said that if they wanted to do pure company owned, it was going to take them $80 million. If they opened it up to franchise, it only cost them $25 million. So they're going to save $55 million.
Wait, how many of their stores would they have to franchise for it to be only 25 million?
I think they were going to do half of them, right?
Yeah.
Well, half of the growth was going to be franchised.
300 in total, but I don't remember, because I remember seeing what Justin was just talking about, how it would only cost 25,000, but I don't remember how many of those 32 in the first batch they were going to have to make a franchise.
Well, they said starting in 2004, 50% of them would be franchised and 50% of them would be company owned.
Right, but these were being built in 2003, weren't they? The 32.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, but I think they already had money for that. They just raised a bunch of money for that.
So my one problem with franchising is what it may do as far as brand dilution goes. And we saw in the beginning of the case how detrimental or how important their operations are. And I mean, the problem with franchising is you get these guys who are entrepreneurial minded, and they want to do things their way, and they want to be their own boss. And so sometimes it can be really hard. And I mean, I've had family members and friends who have been in the franchise business, and there are these big frustrations in it. Not to say that they shouldn't do it, but part of me says, rather than planning straight ahead to do half of your stores as franchises, you're going to test. So with these first 32 stores, you take some number of them, whether it's half or a quarter of them, you make them franchises. Now, the hard thing with that is, how long is it going to take before you have substantial data to see if a franchise is really what you want to do. But I imagine that in a year and a half after building this store and making it a franchise, you get an idea of whether or not your idea and your company works well with the franchise model. And like Connor said, it's hard to look at the company now and know how many franchises they have, or just know that they have a lot of them, and not let that affect your decision. But I'm thinking, if I was back there in the moment, I'd be really worried about that. I think this idea and our brand is what's gotten us far. What happens if we dilute that? Is that going to mess things up for us? And so I would be more cautious there and say, let's do a quarter of these or half of these as franchises, and then work from there. Not committing to doing 150 stores as franchises in the future.
Well, my recommendation is definitely, to do some and kind of work out their franchise agreement and make sure that they get that all solid down. My big thing is if they waited to do the franchise and they grew organically up to that 300, they're going to have to go through the pain of franchising eventually. I mean, that's just the nature of the restaurant industry. I mean, there's a couple, you look out there like In-N-Out, they never franchised. And look how few In-N-Outs there are across the country compared to any of the other companies out there. It's just, I mean, it's astronomical, the difference. If you really want to grow and you want to bring your company to the full customer base across the country or even the world, which is, you know, he talked about that a little bit, you're going to have to franchise. There's just no way. I guess that's a hard way to say it, or maybe a little bit more harsh than reality, but it's going to take a lot longer to grow on your own than it is to have franchise out there. And it's just, there's so much more happening that way. And to answer your question, Tony, the 50-50 was only 25 million. And the reason why is not only would this reduce the organizational challenges, but the combination of cash flow from the franchise unit and reduce capital requirements for company-owned stores would reduce their capital needs to 25 million over the next few years. So essentially, because they're getting revenue from the companies that are franchised, they won't need as much money to build the other 50% along the way.
Well, and they had also been researching other franchises, and I think they mentioned two of them. I don't remember which one, but they had created a very well-working franchising model that made sure that the people they got were good people and then they could manage them. So, I mean, they talked how for their company, they have to create a whole new VP and a whole new department for franchising to ensure things would run smoothly. So,
Dang,
I think it's
stop
been
stealing my points. Freak.
What?
Stop stealing my points. I was just about to say that. Literally, like, that's
Rewind.
2 for 2.
Go ahead.
Connor.
Well, okay, so Panera and Applebee's were the two. And the franchisee relationship it's worked out. You can really have that conversation, but at the same time, and exactly how I was going to say it too, you have the worry of bringing in a VP, high-level management that's going to have to run all that, and what are they going to want? How much is that going to cost you? Do you really want to? But then you also talk about dilution, and is it going to hurt you if the more that you set yourself out there? In-N-Out is different. I'll say this: In-N-Out is family owned. So we have, where I'm from in Chandler, Arizona, there's one of the family members that lives there. They were just in the neighborhood away from us, but we talked to him one time and said, why do you not have more? Because we were out on the East Coast. We're like, why is there no In-N-Out on the East Coast? And they're like, listen, we're family owned. The family members, each one has a share, and that's it. Nobody else out of the family will ever own the company, and so it'll only be where family members are. And so that was pretty interesting that for those guys, and I'm just saying that just as an interesting point, just kind of here's what's new for the day. Compared to Five Guys, you look at Five Guys, who's their competitor, and they're all over the freaking place because they're franchised.
Yeah, but at the same time, they could have stayed family owned,
right,
and franchised because the actual ownership of the company doesn't change by franchising. It just means that you have now taken your process and condensed it into an extremely valuable model that now you can pass over to somebody else, and because you're passing them this profitable model, they can now operate it and make money, and they're going to pay you royalties and fees forever and ever because you provided this service to them. Yeah. Like they could still be family owned.
That's a good point.
They just chose not to.
Is still family owned, and they do franchises, and their family makes bank.
Yeah.
Well, and the way they do franchises, it's actually different. They actually create operators. So you buy like an ownership position. You don't really own it. It's weird the way Chick-fil-A does it, but they create so much wealth in their company.
And they do make so much bank. Oh my gosh.
It's I think it's more difficult though, like to get into to become a franchisee owner for Chick-fil-A than it is to get a top secret clearance, because I mean they go through like moral backgrounds, like everything.
Yeah, like almost all their franchisee owners or their operators started at the bottom and worked their way up to an operator. And it's like, I think it used to be only a $10,000 buy-in. So,
I think that's.
but you had to receive an invitation.
Yeah, it's one of those deals where it's like, all right, now sit down and we'll have this interview, the temple interview. Then you can have a Chick-fil-A.
And then like, okay, and now you'll be rich.
So, by the way,
But yeah, so
all right.
2 minutes.
Okay.
So what do we have? We have 1 or 2 going for franchise, 1 or 2 not.
No,
I'm for franchise.
Carefully.
Connor.
Franchising.
Oh, I was gonna say, you gonna be contrary?
No, never. I'm never contrary. Are you kidding me?
I don't know if we've talked enough about the risks of franchising, because I don't think it's a silver bullet. And if it was as great as it seems, then everybody would do it without question.
they almost do though.
Yeah, there's very few that don't.
But
I know, right?
I would say some of the risks, if you want to talk about some of the risks associated with it is you have at that point you have an independent individual that can run their own business kind of the way they want, and you just have to have a well-designed a franchise agreement so that you don't have issues there. But
did you guys watch that McDonald's movie with the guy? I don't remember his name.
The founder.
Croc.
Yeah.
Yeah, that jackwagon, that idiot.
Right. But
Ronald.
if you look at their franchise, it was a nightmare. I mean, he had people that we started selling barbecue wings, because if you can't keep a good agreement with them and a good communication and whatever you want to call it with one another, then yeah, it could go crazy. And one bad noodles company that runs horribly could be detrimental to the whole company. So.
5 minutes.
But that's why in the get-go you make sure, and once he figured out the right people to put into his franchises, then they ran a lot better. I think Noodles and Company is trying to do the same thing. They'll create a franchisee program where basically you'll be selected, and they'll choose you to join a franchise. It won't be like, hey, I've got money and I want a franchise. Like, okay, here you go. They're going to make sure that you're going to honor the agreements that they have and keep the Noodles and Company true to what they created.
I thought one of the interesting things about the franchise process was the diversification of risk. How by utilizing a franchise, in this case, Noodles and Company or McDonald's could spread load the risk basically away from them. They could push some of that risk off to other individuals. I mean, it's still a win-win relationship. You do well, we do well, but at the same time, like if I haven't put out $500,000 worth of cash for a specific location and it fails, well, you just lost your $500,000 and not me. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's why they have such high initiation costs.
Yeah.
To get into it. I mean, they want to weed out some of the people. I mean, a lot of times they won't let you just buy one as well. You got to be able to fund the territory.
Like McDonald's requires $200,000 or $2 million in assets or something
Yeah,
like
that's
that, liquid assets.
It's crazy.
Also, you can make $50,000 a year.
That's pretty good. That's good.
Yeah, but you don't have to you don't have to actually physically manage it, right?
No, you don't. I mean, they want you to, but you don't have to.
I see the owner of McDonald's in Rexburg in those things all the time. He's always in there.
Yeah, but typically McDonald's owners usually own more than one.
Yeah, he owns 3 of them.
What's his name in Rexburg? I forget the guy's name.
I can't remember either, but
Dude, he hates the McDonald's corporate though.
he hates him.
That McDonald's on Yellowstone Highway there. McDonald's makes them be open 24 hours. Says it just kills them because they have no business from 11 o'clock until 7 o'clock in the morning. But
I used to work
by the
8 p.m.
highway,
to 4
corporate
a.m.
McDonald's
time.
says that it has to be open 24 hours, and that's just how it is.
Well,
and so
the one
he
in town's open 24 hours too, though.
What's that?
Both of them in Rexburg are open 24 hours.
They might both be required to. I don't remember, but
Yeah.
he was saying how that one by the highway hardly makes money because of that. It really kills him.
Huh.
So
You should put a neon sign right next to the highway. McDonald's. We love
Because there isn't one there now.
anyways, guys,
We got to get our last question here, right?
I think we hit most of it in our last one, but of course.
So what kind of numbers
Advantages
did
is
you
rapid
guys get?
expansion. It's an avenue for rapid expansion. Much more cost effective. Disadvantages include possible difficulties in getting your contract nailed down. Brand dilution.
I gotta finish my case, so I'm gonna pull it off.
Okay, let's do it.
Okay, I gotta pull this off because I gotta write the notes really quick. Nobody get their pennies in a while.
All right.
Is that how they say it in France?
No, say it different. You guys still there?
Yep.
Thought I'd lost you guys for a second
What are
there.
your thoughts on question 4 there, Connor?
Well, I think we talked about it. We kind of covered it pretty good there.
That's enough. What are your guys' thoughts on 4?
Well, I think we talked about specific advantages of cost. I mean, money that could be made and saved through that. I think a disadvantage is, I think we talked about that too, is potential errors that can come through poor management of franchisees. But I don't know, there's lots of stuff that can go wrong, go right. Anybody fall asleep?
Yeah, I think it's probably hard for the organizational side of it, but I mean, once you're set up, I mean, I think people are going to come to you. You know, living in Texas, you know, I see a lot of the things that are successful in Utah and Idaho, and I wonder if they'd be successful in Texas. You know, Cafe Rio for one. And I also see a lot of chains that are very popular down here in Texas that are not in Idaho. So I mean, having
Raising Cane's.
Raising Cane's, Salada, you know, there's a lot of them. So I mean, I think that having somebody that lives in an area that is looking for a business idea that is passionate about the food, you know, my wife loves Cafe Rio. It'd be a dream for her to own a Cafe Rio. You know, I mean, if we could bring that here, if we could bring that here, I mean, I think it'd be something that's passionate, like, you know, it would do well. And I think, you know the areas, and I mean, I think from that side of an franchising market, it'd be a lot easier to do that than to be a family-owned company that would have to hire real estate agents and have to find people to lived in the area and, you know, everything like that, instead of having somebody that was already part of the community that wanted to bring a business and see that business grow.
You know, there was a. Have you guys ever heard of Neaters?
Yep.
Yeah.
Neaters is like a huge thing in Arizona. Like every Mormon mother and their dog is all Neaters all at one time. Like everybody goes to the temple like one time, and then after that, everybody goes to Neaters. I don't know why.
It's because their French toast is awesome.
Their French
All
toast
you
is
can eat.
Anyways, besides the point, my parents were offered to go in and start this Kneaders right next to the Gilbert Temple before this other Kneaders was there. And you think about that, it's like you think about these decisions, and it's like, okay, is this going to be lucrative? And it was the first Kneaders in our area. It's like, is this going to be lucrative or is this not? Is it really going to be worth the X amount of money that we're going to put into this? And you kind of have to think of that same thing. It's like, geez. I mean, Tony, what do you think?
Arizona, mother, dog.
That's what I'm talking about. See, just every word. He just hears it. It's like the good word.
Hanukkah.
I still think they should have had something like a Poodles and Co. Like a dog shop, Poodle and Co. That'd be great. Instead of Noodles and Co., Poodles and Co. Dog care product. Let's do something. Let's do it.
Let's make it happen.
Oh, wait. That's so sad that poodle drowned on the news.
What the heck?
Is that your word for the day, Connor? Poodle?
I'm too.
What was that again?
Oh, man, I forgot. We were supposed to come together and figure out a word.
Okay, so summarize it. Tony the Tiger?
Parley.
Farley.
What
Summarize.
kind of number you guys get?
What?
Yeah, that's what I asked. What kind of numbers did you guys get? Oh, wait, that's Excel, huh? Connor goes blank.
Oh.
I kind of explained what my numbers were, but the big thing for me is just the fact that they don't have to outlay a bunch of cash, and they start getting revenue from those. And their intent obviously is to continue to grow. At that, I think it was Chipotle had 790 something locations, and they were wanting to work their way up to 300. And Chipotle is going to be growing, so to try and keep up with them, they're going to add a lot of stores, and you start thinking about $500,000 for 800 stores. That's a lot of money. Whereas, it still has to be paid out, but it's just a matter of they don't have to come up with it themselves.
Yeah.
Which makes it a lot better. Because if you can save $65 million out of pocket, nothing wrong with that. Or $55 million.
Well, that's just to get to 300. Now imagine going to 800 or 1,200.
Well, maybe it's not a bad thing for him to grow slow, and if it's the difference between success and, I just see your paper, dude.
That's okay.
There currently are 410 Noodle and Company locations.
Right now.
So they've slowed down a bit, huh?
They're closing stores right now.
Really?
Are they?
Yeah.
Oh, that's
Like
sad.
50 of them. Closing like 50 stores, but then they're opening 17. So they're just getting out of markets that aren't doing as well and trying new markets.
I gotta finish my summary.
Yeah, but they've got
Says their net
410 with net income of 5.6 million.
Yeah, I was just gonna say that. 7,000 employees.
So they had 510 locations, but then they've cut back on 100 stores.
Right, because the market's changed a lot. We just
They
barely
actually
got
went-
one in Idaho Falls.
They just went public in 2013.
Oh.
I didn't realize you could go buy stock at Noodles and Co.
I didn't realize you could be a publicly traded company and have franchises. I guess you could.
Oh,
though.
absolutely. Well, McDonald's. Hello.
Yeah.
MCD, man.
MCD. Whoop.
It's the ticker.
Yeah.
I just wish I could have bought Noodles and Company shares for $0.25.
So on a whole different, have you guys really paid much attention to the new Regulation A crowdfunding investment opportunities?
No.
So you know how these companies are making like years like Noodles and Company. You go and buy 25-cent shares or whatever, and all of a sudden it goes, it grows rapidly and turns into, a multi-million-dollar company or billion-dollar company or whatever its valuation is right now. But once they finally make it to the stock exchange, they don't grow much after that. I mean, they do, but it's like at that point, I mean, it's a lot slower. Well, just recently in the last 2 or 3 years, it's become possible for people just like you and me to invest smaller amounts of money. I think we talked about it with VidAngel, I think recently.
Yeah.
Anyways, there's a lot of opportunities out there. There's a company right now. I mean, I fly, so aviation is kind of a big deal for me. There's a company right now called XTI that's building an aircraft that will take off and land like a helicopter, but fly like an airplane, similar to the Osprey. And their costs are way lower than the Ospreys. The price per unit. They're utilizing a lot of newer technology with electric motors and things like that. Anyways, you can go buy stock in them right now, and they haven't even they've got pending orders, but not they've got 60 pending orders before they even have a concept built.
Holy cow!
And that represents $600 million in revenue with pending deposits paid for this aircraft. And you can invest as small as $350. But that company, once it actually starts generating revenue, it's going to be, it's going to take 6 to 7 years from now before it's really starting to generate revenue. But when it does, it's going to explode. And then that's where you'll be a part of that big growth. And eventually it'll go public. And when it goes public, then you're, all this cool, like, wow, they lots of value increase. Well, that's, 20, 30 times. That's it's that initial fledgling starting point that has these massive growth. Whereas like, once it, buy stock in Boeing and it ain't going to go nowhere, or at least nowhere fast.
Right. Because it's already gotten to where it's going to be, really.
Yeah. I mean, and that's just one, the XTI, the airplane deal. That's only one of them. I mean, there's a company out there that's doing solar stuff. I mean, you go look for it. Regulation, crowdfunder, Regulation A, opportunities, seed funding, start engines. I mean, there's a company, a new auto company trying to make something very similar to a Hummer, and you can invest in their, there's electric car companies all over the place right now. Anyways, it's been exciting.
Heard of an Elio?
What's that?
You ever heard of an Elio?
Yes, that's a flying car combination.
It's just a 3-wheeled car they're trying to make, and they sold tons of them, and then they totally flopped and went bankrupt.
Oh.
They never made them. But it's kind of the same concept. But
we've got 4 minutes to get everything submitted here.
Oh, fine.
You haven't submitted everything?
Oh, well, excuse me. I was kind of waiting for you guys. I don't want to just go off on my own and be working on turning in stuff while we're in the middle of stimulating conversation.
Well, we should summarize everything. We really summarized everything before, and so we should probably cut the live feed.
Okay, yeah, I'll cut it here.
And then trim off